Wonderful. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Helicon West. My name is Woody. I am the ambassador for Helicon West. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Helicon West is an uncensored public reading series. We host published authors and community writers to showcase all levels of skill and craft. We welcome open mic readers. We welcome donations to keep Helicon West going. You'll find a sign-up sheet for the open mic, as well as bookmarks for the QR code to donate, and the back at the coffee station back there. Help yourself to some Ibis coffee, but please be sure to get a lid if you do so. We want to take care of the carpets as best as we can. And finally, Helicon West humbly acknowledges that we are here on the territory of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation. We are grateful for our sponsors and partners, Sugar House Review, the Logan Library, the USU English Department, Cafe Ibis, and many community volunteers. For more information, interviews, and other blog-related things, please visit heliconwest.wordpress.com. Now, I have written this introduction for Charles myself, so bear with me. And also, there are a lot of Vietnamese names in here, so forgive me. It is not out of a lack of trying, but simple ignorance.
Is this a sign-up sheet?
No, it'll be in the back there.
Sorry.
No worries. All right, Charles is the co-editor and co-translator of 4 books of Vietnamese fiction. Taz Huy An's The Termite Queen. Is that right? Okay.
Right there.
Okay, perfect. With Quan Man Ha in 2023. The story collections Wild Mustard with Vun Za and Nguyen Leun in 2018, as well as Family of Fallen Leaves, Stories of Agent Orange with Nguyen Leun in 2010. And most recently, Zuong Quong's No Man River. He teaches writing at Utah State University and is the associate editor for fiction at ISLE, the Journal of the Association for the Study of Literature and Environment. In 2004 and 2005, he was awarded the Fulbright Fellowship to be the first full-year professor in American Studies at the Vietnam National University in Hanoi. Since then, he has earned a Rockefeller Fellowship and a National Endowment for the Arts Literary Translation Grant for his work, bringing Vietnamese fiction to readers in English. This past spring, he and Professor Jennifer Peoples led the inaugural Haravi Peace Institute semester in Vietnam, in which students learned about the history, literature, and environment of Vietnam while engaging with many of the problems of its long reconciliation with the U.S. Charles has also become a close friend and mentor of mine, and he is a stalwart support for any who wants to take writing seriously and hone their craft to precision. I like to refer to him as the Gordon Ramsay of fiction because he likes to cuss a lot and he'll tell it to you straight. He usually does those things in the pursuit of honing your craft and making you a better writer, so that's always a good thing for his students, as long as they can handle that. If you haven't taken the time to read any of his translated works, I believe you are missing out on a treasure trove of introspection on the human condition, and you would likely benefit greatly from correcting this error in judgment. Please welcome Charles Waugh.
I feel like I have a problem there. Maybe that'll work. Yeah, that works. Thank you, Woody. That was really sweet. I really appreciate it. And yeah, Woody's great. If you don't know Woody, get to know Woody. He's great.
Yeah.
It's been fun watching him grow in his craft of fiction writing these past couple of years. I'm really excited to have him as one of my students again this semester. Thank you guys all for being here. I really appreciate it. I know, unlike the reading that was on campus last week, none of you are actually required by class to be here. So I appreciate you making the extra effort on a Thursday night. This book is a really fun book to have worked on. Just going to tell you a couple of things about this project and about just some of the projects in general, and kind of just thinking about Vietnam as a site of like research and interest. My first book of translations is about people who were suffering from Agent Orange related illnesses. That book is called Family of Fallen Leaves. I worked with Nguyen Lien on that book and also the next book as well. I didn't know anything about translation when I started this. I kind of just made it up as I went along. There's other people who go to school and actually learn translation theory, and they apply that, and there are actual sort of Master of Fine Arts programs in which you can study translation in complete depth and for up to 3 years. I didn't do any of that. I basically just had what to me was an important moral issue, which was that during the 2004-2005 school year that Woody mentioned that I had a full right to teach there, that was the year that victims of Agent Orange, the Vietnamese Agent Orange victims, I can't remember, it's called VAVA, I'm freezing on the acronym. But they brought a lawsuit in the United States court to try to get some kind of compensation for Vietnamese people who had been exposed to Agent Orange and their family members and so on. And they didn't get it. Of course, American soldiers have been compensated and taken care of, and they've got health care and things like that. But it was ruled that the Vietnamese were not eligible for those benefits. And I was teaching at that time, so I'm in the classroom with my students, this group of like 30, 18, 19, 20-year-old Vietnamese kids who, are asking me, why? Why could this be? How could this be? It's clearly a moral issue, so if it's clear that these people have been injured in this way, we should do something about it, and that's just not what happened. And so I had to explain to them how our legal system works, and I had to explain why, they weren't going to get help from the United States. It was really hard. And so one of the things that a colleague of mine that I met at the National University there and I decided to do was put together a book of stories that told stories about being exposed to Agent Orange. And so I didn't know what I was doing, but I just sort of went for my gut, which was like, what's the right thing to do? I mean, I'm an English professor. Like, my skill set is minuscule. Like, I can read Vietnamese and I can write in English real good. Like, what can I do to help these people? And I'll do a translation project. And so that's how we started. And that's where that first book came from. I thought at the end of that book project, and by the way, I will just say, not because of that book, but because of many things that were happening at the same time as that book coming out, a lot of Americans got involved. A lot of Americans lobbied people to get something to happen, and it took a long time. But there was money allocated to help Vietnamese victims of Agent Orange. There was money allocated to clean up the Agent Orange that was left all over the place. And the problem with Agent Orange is it's got this stuff in it called dioxin, which is one of the most toxic chemicals known to humans. And to get rid of it, you have to burn it really, 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 really hot. So you can't just pop it in the oven. You have to build an oven that works at like 10,000 degrees or something like that. So they had to have people come and build those things and then incinerate all of the soil that had been contaminated. And you can imagine in some of these places, mostly around the airports, because that's how they distributed the Agent Orange. They put it in these planes, they took off, they sprayed it all over the place as they fly around. Whenever they were in danger, if they got shot down, if they had to do a ditch landing or something like that, they couldn't land with the weight of all that defoliant inside. So they would just dump it. And so around the airports, especially, there were something like, just like thousands and thousands of times the amount of dioxin that any human should be exposed to at any point. People were fishing in them, not knowing what was in them. There was one guy that they interviewed who had 900 times the amount of dioxin in his body that is says is safe by the World Health Organization. So huge problems. And it's the kind of thing that's not just, it doesn't just go there and hurt people. It gets into people's bloodstream, it gets into their DNA, it actually changes their DNA, so then they pass those problems on to their children. So now we're into like the 4th generation of kids who are still suffering from Agent Orange related illnesses. So, so the problems are still ongoing, but at the very least, while we could, we made money available to clean up these, what they call hotspots. And most of those hotspots have been taken care of. There's a few of them that are still in process. But just, one more thing, and I know I said this at the last one, so I'm sorry for people who are getting a repeat message here, but Jen and I have met kids who suffer from Agent Orange related illnesses. It's really hard to meet people like that and to recognize that your country is in some way responsible for that kid's suffering. And one of the things that was helping those kids, as well as kids who have found unexploded ordnance and then been blown up, or their family members have been blown up, one of the things that was helping them was USAID projects, USAID. And I don't know if you guys followed the news. There was so much going on this past spring that was horrible. It's easy to miss, but USAID has been completely gutted, and a lot of those funds have been taken away. Some of them were reinstated, but there's no real future for them as far as we know. So, the money that they were giving was teaching little kids to recognize what a bomb is and not to pick it up, and then to provide a team to defuse the bomb and take care of it, right? And now that's not gonna keep happening, at least not with our help. So, if you want to write a letter to your senator or your congressperson and have one more thing to talk about, that's something that is just typically not one of the political footballs that get thrown around, but and actually, I think that some of our congresspeople do listen to, so it's worth saying something about that. Sorry, long digression. This is always what happens when I get up here. I can't not say those things. I think, as someone who is an American who feels strongly patriotic, and that I feel like our country should be the best place that it should be, to me that means taking care of things that we've done wrong, and it's hard for me not to at least throw that message out there. But back to translation. I thought at the end of that book project that was the last thing that I would do that had anything to do with the war. There was nothing really in the literature that had been translated. A lot of the earliest translations from Vietnamese in the U.S. has come from our own veterans, and our veterans have been amazing. I just want to be clear. This isn't like a protest against the guys who served over there, because none of them wanted to be there. But many of them have gone back. Many of them have led the way. Many of them have created organizations to help people, and they have just done tremendous work. Some of those guys were the guys who did those first books of translation. And for them, it was like, everybody in the US thinks that when you say Vietnam, all you mean is a war. And so they felt like it was urgently necessary to get books out here, Vietnamese books in print in the US, so that people could start to see the Vietnamese as people. That was the baseline. Like, not just, not any issue or anything else, but just look at these people. They're people. It's not a war. They're people. So people like Wayne Carlin, John Balaban, Wayne Quaiduk, others, they led the way. But most of that stuff that they translated had to do with the war. Writers who were writing about the war, Vietnamese writers who were writing about the war, and so on. So that was a pretty well-traveled body of work. If you were going to try to find some Vietnamese literature in English, it typically had to do with the war. And so I thought I was done with that. My next book, Wild Mustard, really embraced that. We looked at young writers, people who were born at the end of the war or even much further past that, so that it was a group of people who really the most traumatic or most remarkable incident of their young lives was not the war itself, but rather the turn towards globalization, which having suddenly be opened to the U.S. after the embargo ended and to the world, because the embargo kept other people from trading with them as well. Suddenly the world crashed into Vietnam at the same time that the internet was starting, and so that was another way that the whole world was suddenly pouring in. Cable TV suddenly was available in Vietnam for the first time. It's like all at once, it was like the entire world comes in and impacts them. And so I wanted to kind of have a book that talked about how these young writers had this experience of turning from a market economy to from a controlled economy to a free market economy, right? From a communist economy to a capitalist one. And that book, Wild Mustard, really, I think, did a great job of capturing that. You can really see the anxiety about those changes. You can see the hope, the optimism, the humor, but also like the recognition that sort of certain cultural things were changing, because that's the moment in which, before then, Vietnamese culture was really insular. There wasn't a lot going on, and so the things that they did to celebrate, to have fun, to go to a festival, to enjoy themselves, it was all their own cultural production that was doing those things, right? And so, like, you have a festival and you're like on this swing with this other person, and it's a big giant bamboo structure, and it's like, that's super fun, but like no one else does that, as a thing to do. And now they're watching movies and TVs, and and they're playing golf, like everybody else around the world. So things are different there now, and you can see that moment. And I was trying to somehow recognize that. The third book is somewhat similar to that it's kind of looking at the way that when all these people start coming to Vietnam, what they're doing is most of them are coming as tourists. And so what that means is you have to have places for those people to stay, which means then too, if it's a communist country, all of the land is owned by the government. So how do you, and leased to the people, you get like a 50 or 100-year lease. And so big swaths of farmland, these farmers don't really own the land, but they own the rights to the land for 50 or 100 years. But there are these other ways to get around that, and that was what was happening. All these big companies, all these multi-billion-dollar companies were coming in and either buying people out willingly or coercing people off their land, and then building these big projects like resorts or hotels or golf courses. And that's kind of what that book is about, is the corruption that's connected to that. And also, it's a really fun book too, because the person who's the narrator is someone who kind of inherits his father's business. And so as he's learning about how terrible it is, we're learning how terrible it is. And he's also, of course, there's a romance involved, and he falls in love with this young woman who's a law student, who's leading the fight against the development that's happening. And so there's all sorts of little ways that book is really fun. But at any rate, I thought I was done with that stuff. I figured everything else would be contemporary. But then a couple years ago, my translation partner, Quan Man Ha, said we should do this book called Ben Kong Chong. And Ben Kong Chong means riverside with no husband, which sounds so much better in Vietnamese. It's not just the river, it's like the banks of the river, and it's not just one little part, it's like this big section, and there's syllables involved and all sorts of things. So we decided that the closest approximation was No Man River. But one of the books back in that first wave of writers who translated that early sort of war fiction, one of those books that got translated was this book called The Sorrow of War by a writer called Bao Ninh. And Bao Ninh, if any of you watched the Ken Burns documentary on Vietnam, anybody, show of hands, did anybody catch that on PBS? A couple people? Bao Ninh was the guy with the gray bouffant hair. It's so great, I love him so much. But he has kind of become the spokesman, I think, for Vietnamese literature around the world, because that translation was picked up, and that book was published in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, and so on. and also in the United States. And it really, as the only, one of the only novel-length things that were published, like it just kind of took off. And so it sold millions of copies around the world. It's probably the best known book around the world of Vietnamese literature. With the exception of maybe The Tale of Kyo, which is like this really old story that some people have heard about for various reasons. But in 1991, Bao Ninh won the Writers Association's award for Best Novel that year. He shared that prize with the author of this book. This was the second book that had, there was actually 3 of them shared it that year. And, but this one was not translated into English until now. And my translation partner said, we should look at this. You know, it's a classic. Vietnamese people love this book. They love this book more than they love The Sorrow of War. Sorrow of War is moody and kind of postmodern in terms of how it's, you know, how it works. There's lots of these different timelines. It's really fragmented. It's a kind of a difficult read in some ways. This book is much more linear. It follows a whole village worth of characters over the course of 40 or so years. And he said it's been made into a movie in Vietnam like twice. So it's like they even felt so strongly about it that the one movie wasn't good enough to do it again. But it really, it's a story that means a lot to Vietnamese people. And so thinking about this book, you know, it's really, he said, you got to read it, and we should do this, because again, this year, 2025, April 30th, it's the 50th anniversary of the end of the war, of that war. And so he said we should try to do this and get this out in time for that anniversary. I read it, I wasn't sure about it, but the more this is always the case with all the translation projects I work on, I'm not sure about what's going on in there, and I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. But then by the time I'm done with it, I love it. And I love this book so much. In part, I think, because I think better than anything else that I've read, it really explains a lot about Vietnamese culture. Vietnamese culture is not uniform, and I should say that right off the bat, that if you're talking about people in the south or on the Mekong Delta or along the Cambodian border, for our friends back here who have actually lived there, it's very different. But this tells the story of a northern village during that period. And so you get what is kind of thought of as kind of like, it's where Hanoi is, it's that northern part, it's the part of the culture that sort of leads the way with all the others. So for example, just like all these different parts have different kind of cultural differences, they have different pronunciations of different words, but everyone will tell you that the Hanoi accent is the one that is the official one. So this is a sort of recognition that like, that's the official, this is the Vietnamese kind of thing. And then everything else is sort of their take on various things. But having been in Vietnam, as Woody said, this spring with students, we read a manuscript version of this, and it was just so fun to teach this alongside being there, because there's just so many things that you get to see while you're there that you then get to understand, because the book talks about those things in some fashion. It's this really incredible moment. I'm not sure that I can think of an analogy that'll make any sense, but it starts right after the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, when the Vietnamese kick the French out finally, when they win their independence from them, and a veteran from that war comes home, and that's kind of the first opening part of the story. And then it takes you, that's like 1954 or something like that. And it takes you all the way through sort of the end of the 1980s or so. So you see the American War, and then you also see the war against China that happened in 1979 when Vietnam invaded Cambodia to kick out the Khmer Rouge, which was, if you don't know anything about that, the Khmer Rouge, watch the movie The Killing Fields. That'll crack your brain open. But the Khmer Rouge were running raids on the Vietnamese border. And so in order to make that stop, the Vietnamese invaded. They took out the Khmer Rouge and they set up their own government. But the Chinese didn't like that. They were allied with the Cambodians and so the Khmer Rouge. And so they invaded in the north. And so there was a war then fighting between the Chinese and the Vietnamese on that border. So all those things are included in this book, but at a distance. You know, it's not about the wars itself. The other fiction that I talked about, that early stuff, you read about battles, you read about soldiers, you read about people in the South doing, you know, having battle, killing people and things like that. That's not what this book is about. This book is about this little village that this guy, that this author grew up in. And what it was like to live in that village while everyone else left to go fight in the war. And it's just beautiful. It's such an interesting moment. It's also this moment in which, you know, Vietnamese culture is still what that traditional Vietnamese culture would be. It's really based really strongly on the environment. So the rivers in this story are really important, the mountains are really important, the farming is really important, the foods that they eat, the animals that they're around, all those things have a big part in this story. And like I said before, it's a moment where they're really starting to change. Vietnam is also an ancestor worshiping nation, so that means, it doesn't mean like that they think that their ancestors are gods or something like that. It's not like that. It's more like everybody just venerates their own family, and it's a way, if you think that they're like in heaven looking down on you and can somehow intercede in your daily life, like I think it's a way for you to kind of think, well, I'm never just here doing my own thing. You know, grandpa's just like hanging out over my shoulder, so I can't fuck up too much, or grandpa's gonna be pissed, and then it'll be bad luck for the family, you know. And that's a really interesting kind of thing too, that the ancestors are based on the land. The land is like, you have a homeland. It's where your ancestors come from. There's this deep and intimate connection between the land and the people of your family. And so that moment is kind of this interesting moment, because it's also the moment that the socialist government in the North kind of takes over, and they don't know what they're doing. You know, they've been fighting against France for the last 10 years. They don't know how to actually run a government. They're only figuring out like how to make it work. And so this early period is where they start to really put forth some of those policies for the very first time. And so one of those policies, for example, is land redistribution. When the French were running Vietnam, they rigged the system to make sure that people didn't have land. By the time the French were about to be kicked out, only 30% of the Vietnamese owned the land that they were on. So 70% landless, which just made them workers, basically, right? So there's that moment where the culture is really changing, and all those traditional cultural ideas based on that landscape and on that land itself is coming into contact with all these socialist ideas about what's the right way to run a society, and trying to get rid of superstition. There's lots of superstitious ideas. Like if you believe in ancestors are everywhere, they also believe other things have spirits that are everywhere. So, you know, the frog, you know, Mr. Toad is also a revered ancestor of yours. You know, you could come back as a toad, so you don't want to mess with the toad. The toad is nice. Toad is your uncle. This idea that these spirits have some impact on your life, you know, one of the ideas of communism is that stuff doesn't really exist. And so, you know, it kind of creates this real tension in the society. And so you see this generational change between the young people who want a new way that's free from all the burdens and the superstitions of the past, and the old people who are like, no, our ancestors are gonna kick our asses if we keep messing this up. You know, we gotta do it right. We have to make sure that they know how to live their lives. And so that's really the core of this book. And I know I did this last time too, I can't help it, just because I feel like Vietnam is such a cipher for so many people that I feel like I have to explain a lot about it. But hopefully from what you've gotten from this so far, I just love that place. You know, it's so fascinating. It's so deep and rich in a way that I'm still trying to figure out. And I really love doing projects like this because it means to me that I can take something like that and I can make it accessible to a whole lot more people. You know, and the more people who know something about Vietnam and don't think about it as a war, but as a bunch of people who are really interesting and vibrant, I think the world's a better place. And that's why I do translation. So that's where this book comes from. Woo! So here's a little section. I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna read a little bit that I read the other day too. It had long been said that Lang Village had many passionate people, both talented men and beautiful women. The village had the largest communal house in the district, the biggest mango tree, the most beautiful stone bridge, and the purest, coolest river water. No wonder the mothers there sang so many lullabies that honored their village's many virtues. The elders often said that the village had been founded on the back of a dancing dragon, the Din River, whose waters flowed from the Lin tributary before twisting and turning through the district. They said its water was the mother's milk that fertilized the land and nurtured the villagers throughout their lives. The bucolic village was typical, with several large banyan trees, a pier alongside the river, a communal house, young women who wore pink blouses and shawls and sang Ko Dao, and carefully selected beautiful young people who were costumed as generals, mandarins, elephants, and other chess pieces on festival days, also celebrated with loud beating drums. Over time, the talented and beautiful young ones became elderly men and effervescent, betel-chewing women. On special occasions, they told their children and grandchildren once upon a time fairy tale stories, reminding them that all the villagers had to know their history. Grandfather Nguyen, the head of the Nguyen clan, the largest clan in Lang Village, often sat cross-legged in the center of the floor of the communal house's middle room, which was also the floor of the communal house's, which was also the ancestor worshiping room, telling stories like these to his grandson, Nia, and to the other children of the village. Nia often sat alongside a girl named Hang, who was a member of the Vu family and who also loved to listen to the stories. Her mouth would gape and her eyes would go wide as she listened. By the time she was 5 or 6, she could retell all the stories without missing a single detail. Grandfather Nguyen would stroke his beard and smile as he gazed out over his rapt young audience. One of the stories began like this. In the middle of the largest rice paddy, there's a pond whose water remains clear all year round. Some villagers call the pond the fairy's belly button, and some call it the fairy's vagina. I didn't say that at school, I thought that was weird. But I call it the fairy's eye because only a fairy's eye can be so clear as to see through a woman's heart to her innermost feelings. But once upon a time, the pond was just a stinking, muddy bog where buffalo wallowed. Ringed with reeds, the bog was full of ugly bottom fish, a home to swamp hens, leeches, frogs, and toads. Back in those days, a woman named Ngun was the most beautiful of all who lived in Dong Village. Her round, twinkling eyes were like 2 shiny lychee seeds. Her smooth skin was ivory, her hair like long silk. At 16, her parents married her off to a man she did not love, so on her consummation night, she ran to the pond and drowned herself. After the suicide, the reeds, leeches, carp, and swamp hens all disappeared, and the water of the pond turned clear. And ever since her death, all the women of Lang Village have considered this pond a refuge. To this day, will bathe there when they hope to wash away misfortune. This is also why the women of our village have smooth ivory skin and look like fairies, and why they call the pond the fairy's eye. There were many other stories the village elders liked to tell. One was about a ghost that lived under the zui tree in the graveyard. The ghost had eyes as red as a jackfruit and a tongue as long as a hand. The ghost wandered among the graves and chased after widows. If he managed to catch one, she'd have no choice but to become his wife. On rainy, windy nights, the ghost's bride would feel compelled to wander out to the cemetery and sleep with the ghost beneath the zui tree until dawn. Another scary story claimed a water monster lived below the wide wooden pier in front of the lineage temple. Every year or two, it would abduct a child. It had a long black body and its spindly red legs looked like the roots of a chinaberry tree. As big as a basket boat, the water monster could drag even a grown man down below the surface and drown him. Despite these legends, embellished and made more terrifying by various storytellers over the years, no one was really scared. The villagers still loved to bathe and swim in the beautiful river. In the winter, the clear, slow-moving water would become so shallow that the riverbed's perfectly white sand could be seen glittering under the sunlight. During the monsoons, the water would rise and turn all the trees green. The village ancestors called the whole riverside area No Man River, but over time, some people also came to call it the River of Love. Bends in the river divided it into 3 sections and also kept each stretch secluded from the others. Boys and men used the upstream part to bathe and swim. Women and girls used the middle, which left the part downstream for water buffaloes and their herders. Patriarchy. In the afternoons, pimply teenage buffalo boys would jump into the water from the backs of their buffaloes. The bulls liked to take this time to flirt with the cows and sometimes tried to mate with their partners in the water. The boys would jump and dive into the water until their eyes turned red and only ever went home once it got dark. Bare-chested elderly men liked to take their grandchildren to the pier. Fathers carried their kids on their shoulders, and young men and women, farmers, often ended their workdays by walking from the rice paddies directly to the river to bathe for a while, take off their mud-stained clothes and rinse them clean. The gentle breeze and slowly flowing water caressed their bodies like invisible hands, helping them forget their sorrows and hardships. Simply put, the cool water made people feel good. That's why so many young married couples often bathed in the river together and never thought twice about the legends of the water monster or the red-eyed ghost. But the seductive beauty of the river did actually cause some tragedy. Maybe the most tragic of all was the irreconcilable feud that arose between the Nguyen and the Vu families. Late in the evening of the day, the whole extended Nguyen clan had celebrated the inauguration of their lineage temple. The only daughter and most beloved child of the Nguyen patriarch went to the river to bathe. In the dark, she did not see the young Vu man swimming downstream, nor he her. Suddenly their naked bodies met. Both were terrified, each thinking the water monster had come to drown them. He swam straight for the shore, but she fainted and drowned. The next morning, some fishermen found the Nguyen woman's naked floating body caught against the silver stone bridge. When it was revealed that the young Vu man had also been swimming in the same place at the same time, the two families erupted into a bloody fight. That's when the Nguyen patriarch uttered a curse that would be repeated endlessly over the years. The Din River will always flow. The Silverstone Bridge will stand forever. The river of love will always be beautiful and romantic. And the Nguyen Vu feud will never end. So what that does is set up for us a kind of a common trope story in which two families don't particularly care for one another. And the characters that we've already met, Hein and Mia, the young people watching, listening to these stories, of course they fall in love with one another. And of course then they want to get married. And but all of the older generation still cherishes these old beliefs. And so how do they get together? How can they live together? That's what the story is about. And then the war comes in and takes them away from one another as well. So it's there's a lot of that happening there. Woody, I have literally no idea how much time I have up here.
You have another 15 minutes until we need to start.
Okay. Let me read one more section so you can kind of just see those two coming together. It's kind of fun. So one of the reasons that I love the story with my and teaching it with my students this past spring was that there's so many little details about the story that mean something. And in Confucian beliefs, Nia means righteousness, and it's one of the principles that all families teach their kids. And like with other things like more filial piety, respecting your ancestors. Moral debt, your parents gave you life, so you have an unpayable debt that you have to keep trying to pay through your entire life, which, as a parent, I really understand. But all these principles get embodied in these characters in different kinds of ways. And so there's all these really fun things that get revealed about Vietnamese culture just through random details like that. There's a phrase that I used here, the lineage temple, earlier. Back in those days, every family, there's only so many surnames in Vietnam. Like here in the US, we've got thousands, maybe tens of thousands of them, because we have people from all over the world here. But there, the way they formed is different, and so there's really only maybe, I don't know the right number, so any of them I make up would be me making it up. But let's say 30, maybe 50, I don't know. But way fewer, under 100 for sure. And so the clan is like all of the Nguyen's. All the Nguyen's are part of the clan, but they might be only distantly related, but they keep track of that, right? And every year on the oldest ancestor that they have that they're trying to commemorate, and usually that's about 4 generations before the oldest person who's still left alive, right? So you're not just your grandfather, but your oldest person's great-great-grandfather, right? They have these days where they commemorate that death anniversary. And so they get together, they have a festival, it's a big party, they make all this food, everyone from the clan comes. I'm sure for those of you who've grown up in Utah, you've been to your own family reunions, you can start to imagine what it's like. A lot of people eating a lot of food, it's a lot of fun, right? And these families, again, so then there's the Vu family is in this feud with this Nguyen family. For the most part, it just means that they're not supposed to get together, and they leave it at that. There's not really any fighting or anything at that point. Let's see. So they're getting ready for the festival day, and one of the older patriarchs of the Nguyen family is a character named Uncle Sung, and he's kind of a rascal, and he's kind of a funny guy in the story, so I'll read a little part from him. Very early the next morning, Nia, the young kid from that first section, woke to having his cheek pinched very hard. "Wake up," said great Uncle Sung. Still only half awake, Nia just barely understood that Uncle Sung had asked him to keep an eye on the cooks and kitchen maids all day to make sure no one stole any meat, sticky rice, or fruit for their own families at home. Nia had been told that when he grew up, he would be the head of the Nguyen clan. The boy had no real understanding of the significance of that position, but he did know that every member of the clan feared Uncle Sung, who was his grandfather's younger brother. His grandfather and Uncle Sung also had 3 more younger brothers, Kin, Phung, and Rin, who all now had gray hair and long wispy beards. Some of their children were actually younger than Nia, but he still had to call them aunt or uncle, and he hated them because even though he was older, they always behaved toward him in a superior, condescending way. All day, Nia watched the adults prepare for the big event. The lineage temple was packed with people. Outside in the courtyard and in the kitchen, adults hurried back and forth carrying platters full of meat, baskets stacked with yellow rice cakes, and bamboo trays heaped with red sticky rice. Nia noticed that all the members of the Nguyen clan, regardless of age, seemed cheerful and had put on their best clothes. Each individual household in the clan was different from the next, but they all worked hard all year round, and on this date each year maintained the tradition of gathering to honor the extended family. "Have you seen Uncle Van?" Nguyen's father, Kian, had come up from behind and tapped him on the shoulder. Run to the communal house and tell him to come here right away. Dad, said Mia, I'm busy. His father raised his voice. Go now. Mia ran to Uncle Sung and whispered in his ear, I have to go get Uncle Van. Have you caught anyone stealing? Asked Uncle Sung. Kind of, Mia stammered. Don't be afraid, tell me. But go ahead and tell me, I'll teach them a lesson. Your son, Uncle Sung, lied Mia. He stole some meat and a bottle of wine and hid them in a bamboo basket. Then he covered them with cabbage leaves and gave them to his wife to take home. Uncle Sung's face blanched. He was speechless for a moment, but then he grinned and patted Mia on the shoulder. You're too honest. My son probably gave the meat to our dog. Don't you remember I have a huge dog? When she has puppies, I'll give you one. Here, have a few coins to buy some marbles. Don't tell anyone about this. Mia took the coins and ran to the back room of the lineage temple. He put 2 bananas in his pocket and ran to the communal house. In the courtyard, he found Hang, the girl from the before, sitting on one of the stone dogs reading. Aren't you afraid of those stone dogs? Mia pinched her cheek. Where's Uncle Van? Ow, you're terrible. You pinched me too hard. Uncle Van is inside. Here are some bananas. Put them away inside and then come join the party with me. What party? At the Nguyen lineage temple. Today's our ancestor's death anniversary. But I'm not a Nguyen. You live in the same house as Uncle Van, so we can consider you an honorary member of the family. Uncle Van won't let me go for sure. Plus, I'm afraid of old man Sung. He's made it very clear that no Nguyen boy can be friends with a Vu girl. Mia went inside to look for Uncle Van. He didn't know why, but Hang was right. Uncle Van wouldn't let her go to the party. Mia sulked angrily behind his uncle. Normally, he'd be so proud to follow behind the village hero. Even so, he had to admit, Uncle Van looked really great in his new shoes and military uniform with all the medals pinned to his chest. So, of course, as you can tell, Mia's a bit of a prankster, and he and Hein play with one another, and as we see them grow older, they get closer and closer and closer and closer, and eventually they're caught playing around in a way that's not particularly appropriate, and then things kind of come out into the open, and that's when the two families really come down on them pretty hard. But I think I'm going to stop there because that leaves me about 10 minutes in case there's some questions. So thanks for listening, everybody.
Is there a like a phrase or just something that is not translatable really, that if you could like introduce it as like a borrowed phrase, you would, like schadenfreude or deja vu, things like that?
Well, like what we would bring to, what Vietnamese thing would we bring here to the U.S.? Well, I'm not so sure about that because like I can barely say anything in Vietnamese. It's so dang hard to say anything. Most Vietnamese words are at least 2 syllables. It's like a word gets put together with one little 3-letter word and a second little 3-letter word, and together that they make a word. So like Hoa Binh is peace, for example. But every single one of those little packets has a tone on it, which there's 6 different tones. So when you put those together, you have 6 different ways to screw up that first word, and then you got 6 more ways to put there. And when you do, I'm not a mathematician or anything, but I think it's like 6 times 6 at least, like 36 different ways to say it wrong. You can definitely get yourself into trouble. There's already words, I guess, that we do know that are great in the U.S., like pho. Pho is great, right? If you've never had noodle soup, that's great. For a little while, we were going to have a pho restaurant here in town, the Pho King. Got approved initially, and then somebody complained. And so that building is still empty as far as I can tell. I would have loved to have the Pho King in our...
Is there banh mi around here anymore?
So let's see, who makes, and I'm going to say it the way I say it, and my wife knows that I cause all sorts of embarrassment to her when I correct people about it. Let's see. There's somebody has buying me here in town. Who is it?
Sabores and also
Le Croissant. Yeah. And the one and not Cafe Sabor, but at the depot station or whatever that horrible Mexican food is. Sabores, that's over by the by the old theater, like by the University 6, and their banh mi's not bad. I mean, so when they swear, they say the word like death. I think that's pretty good. It's like Chet. I think that's pretty good. And I'm sorry if anyone in here is named Chet, but that one's pretty good. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah, Eli.
It sounds like because all the context that you're giving us to an audience that maybe doesn't understand a lot of the cultural context going into the book, it seems like there's kind of maybe a narrow ideal audience versus translating it into English. Your hope is to get it into people who don't have any of that expertise. So I'm curious, is that something you wrestled with of how to reconcile that so much context you need versus trying to get it in the hands of people without that context?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Eli. And I would just say, too, that I feel like this book needs more context than some of the others in some ways. You know, like The Termite Queen, I don't think you need a whole lot of Vietnamese cultural context. I think that I've given you all that background mostly because I feel like I find it fascinating. And I think that's why I love the book so much. So I'm hoping that if any of those things sounded interesting to you, that you'll want to read the book too. But maybe I have worked at cross purposes and I actually bored you for 45 minutes. and you'd rather just hear what the story's about. It's such a great question. I think it'd be fine. And one of the things that what I think about is that when there's something that I feel is important, we'll write a little note at the bottom of the page. So there's a fair amount of those there. Anything that's there that's left a Vietnamese word, I usually put a note for, or things that seem super weird, like what's with those chess costumes? That I read about. Just festival days, people would dress up as the Chinese chess characters, or a man or an elephant, or whatever. It's just that's something that was fun for them, I guess. I don't know. But I don't think you need a ton of that to get into the book. There's a lot of stuff that's explanatory, and you understand through the relationships of the characters, I think, how a lot of this stuff is functioning. But I'm trying to give a little bit of the backstory behind some of those things and those conflicts as well. And just as proof that you don't need a whole lot of that context, my own father, my own dear sweet dad, read that book twice. He read this book twice. I just can't even believe it. And for him, the hardest part was that the names are so hard to pronounce that his question to me every single time about the book always was just okay, how do I pronounce that character's name again? Who's that character? I can't keep them straight. And that's good advice too, just to recognize different people are going to come to this story in different ways, and not knowing a character's name is kind of an important part of that. So try to make some of those things clear as I go along. And I figure if my dad read that book twice, anybody can read this book. Right?
Who doesn't read? That's an important part.
He does. He's not a big reader. He's not a big fan of fiction or nonfiction. He's kind of a TV and football guy. Yeah, Joseph.
You may have shared this before, but I can't think of the answer. Where did your love for Vietnamese people and culture come from?
Yeah, good question. I grew up, I was a teenager in the 1980s, and for those of you who are about my age or older, you recognize that there were a bunch of movies that came out during that time. Apocalypse Now, The Deer Hunter, Platoon, Rambo, all those movies were coming out when I was a young teenager, and to the point where I think Rambo was 1982 or 3, and so that made me 12 or 13. R-rated movie that my dad said I had to see. And it's like, whoa, that doesn't happen at my house. You know, so he took me to see that movie, and he prefaced it. Like, that was the other thing. Like, we saw all kinds of crazy movies together as a family. But he never like prefaced it in any kind of way. But he told me that movie was important for us to see. So here I'm like 13-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid. I'm like, what is going on here? And then you see the movie, and it's about this guy who comes home from the war and is the super soldier, and then it's really about him just fighting in the forest against this town full of rednecks. And it's like, oh, what I'm missing it. I don't get what we're trying to get here. And it took me until I was being an adult and sort of kind of understanding that that was our country processing what that war meant to us. And so, I mean, I was fascinated with it just because I loved most of those movies anyway. You know, Full Metal Jacket is such an incredible movie, one of my favorite Stanley Kubrick movies. But so many of those movies had such an impact, and it felt like they were trying especially to say something about who we are. And I think you really get that in both Platoon and Full Metal Jacket in a way. But it took me a while to be able to put that together. As an undergraduate, I was a history and English double major. I did a master's in history. During that degree, I started learning Vietnamese. I was studying Americans in Vietnam at the time. So it kind of came out of all that. It really especially hit me hard as an undergraduate. I had a really great teacher who taught my history of Vietnam War class, and then he taught a bunch of other classes that were like a history of Laos course, for example, and looked at what happened in Laos during the war, because Laos was not even in the war, and then they got creamed by the war. Laos is still the most bombed country per capita in the world. Like, more bombs in Laos than anywhere else per capita. And I kicked this fact, again, sorry, I'm gonna go into this mode where I can't help myself, sorry. We dropped 15 million tons of bombs on Vietnam and Southeast Asia during that war. That's more than all the bombs during all of World War II. They had a 10 to 20% failure rate, so 10 to 20% of them did not go off. Again, not a math major, but 10 to 20% of 15 million is like anywhere from 1.5 to 3 million bombs that didn't go off and are still there. So at any rate, Laos was really screwed over. And I had a special class with him. We had these things called junior tutorials where there's just 3 other students and the teacher, and it was just so great, like just learning in this very deep, close thing. But that's where I really learned about Agent Orange and what had happened there. And you know, I think the thing about all those movies in the 80s, like, it was clear was, especially with Rambo, but also with the others, the message from those was that the Americans are the victim of that war. Like, we're the ones who suffered the most. This is about us. You look at those movies and you don't really ever even see a Vietnamese person in them. They've been erased. And so, like, it just struck me that we're telling ourselves a story about ourselves that's not true. And then also, here are all these people who are still suffering to this day for the decisions we made. And we're not getting it, you know. We did horrible things there, you know. Again, I don't blame any of those veterans who were there. I blame decision makers, but a lot of bad stuff happened there beyond just the fact of blowing people up and killing them. We killed more civilians there than actual combatants, you know. A lot of bad stuff happened there, and in my mind, that means we got, I guess, just to borrow the phrase, a moral debt. You know, we should do something. We should get involved. We should help them. We can help them. You know, why shouldn't we help them? So trying to do something like that, I think that's what led me to that history degree, and that got me learning Vietnamese, and then the Agent Orange thing. This is the thing I could do. You know, so.
Thank you, Charles.
Back there. Did you have a question? Oh, I thought I saw a hand.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. How about the veterans today that came back from
Yeah.
Iraq?
I don't know. I can't say. It's not really my area of expertise, but the things I would say about that are this, that during the Vietnam War we had drafts. So there was like millions of young American boys who got sent there without their choice. The war itself was suspect. If you watch that Ken Burns documentary, you really see just how bad the decision making was, how much we were fighting this war and killing people just for our own sense of our own like importance, and that we would never lose a war. You know, like they couldn't get themselves out of it because they felt like it would look bad for them, and they recognized that they couldn't win the war. Their allies were not capable of doing it on their own, and there's all sorts of things about that war that made it kind of particularly horrible. I don't know about Iraq. You know, those guys are all part of no, those guys weren't drafted. They chose to be in the war. The conduct of that war was different. The Army learned a lot from things like the My Lai massacre. Like they adopted ethics standards that made, and training that made sure that things like that shouldn't happen again. So I feel like there's this kind of difference. I think, you know, people talk about the connection between Vietnam and Iraq in the sense that they were that word quagmire, that people got stuck in them, that we got stuck in the Vietnam War and couldn't get out. And so some people were making a kind of an analogy with that with Iraq, because we were in Iraq for a long time. So there's that kind of connection to it, but I think they were fundamentally different kinds of wars. So I don't know. Thank you guys for being here. Folks for Sam, giving me my author's discount. Don't make me have to carry that big heavy box. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right, it's justice for normal people. All right. So we'll go ahead and jump into our open mic section as quickly as possible. We may not be able to get everyone in this time. I apologize, we ran a little bit long, but like totally worth it, right?
Maybe I'll wait until next time. You can skip over.
Perfect.
I'll wait till next time.
Thank you, Star, we appreciate it. Okay, so then our first readers tonight are going to be Mike, Mark, and Denise. So, whoever Mark is.
Oh, I'm next?
Yeah, you're up.
All right. 3 poems. This is America is having lively debate over which pizza to order. They all glisten scientifically vibrant yellow and red. Restaurants that churn out the pies bear rootless, optimized names on shells of drywall that echo with brevity and haste. They could easily shift to a taco place or an insurance office or something. They're dipped in latex that ranges from light gray to dark gray. Color and shape would only slow them down. On the bright side, they boast recyclable pizza boxes. Never mind that your town refuses to recycle pizza boxes. This one is, right now it's called Memory in Motion. Precious nuggets keep slipping through a misshapen net in the currents. I want to scoop up more names of the people I see every day. I want to hoard daily sensations like flakes of fool's gold. Experience taught that most things don't come back. Forgetting is letting them go before they're taken. There might be some bruised gray matter that doesn't know it's safe to have a surplus. To make a special effort, I've started flexing more mental effort to carry the present. I've noticed what I used to skip. An aphid on a fuzzy leaf, a guy at work named Paul I usually pass silently in the hall. The half of me that is always so tired wants to leave behind these ordinary encounters, but I become their advocates. You are important, I say silently of them. You are important, Paul. See, I remember Paul. You're important, Aphid, and leave too. I came back to you like I promised. I guide my renewed mind to squirrel away stories of brights and darks and smiles and terrains that help me get on my shoes. When I forget myself, this trick also works in mirrors. And this last one is called, If You're Reading This, I Have Been Raptured. You may find this note abandoned in the husk of a shirt and pants. They could even still be standing like an empty man starched by fairy dust. You might find it crumpled under the seat of the Jeep I was driving when my righteous form beamed through the windshield, SUV swerving into an orphanage or something. It could even be flying around the bin on my vacuum as the motor burns belly up on a pinched rug. You will have exhumed this message from my dust and read the good news. Get fucked, losers. I have been hoovered. Amen. Thank you.
How can you follow rapture? Hi, you guys.
I Denise.
I won't comment about that. Okay. I have 2 poems for you tonight, and thanks, Charles. That was fabulous. All the context was really interesting. It was great. So this is called Another Poem About Flowers. A friend told me that she could not bear to read another poem about flowers. I get it. I do. I felt that way myself. What difference does poetry really make in this tumultuous world anyway? I am in a line of cars waiting to exit the shopping plaza parking lot. In the grass off to the side of the exit drive, a woman in a tattered green coat sits on a small yellow stool holding a cardboard sign. Next to her feet is an orange Home Depot bucket of colored long-stem roses wrapped in cellophane. Behind her, a child sits on a blanket playing with a small toy. A smaller child sleeps in a stroller. The car in front of me pulls up, pauses, stops. The woman sets down her sign. With her hands full of roses, she rises, steps over to the car, and leans toward the open window. She leans in further. She reaches the flowers in through the window. Oops, I missed something here. A car honks from behind us in the line, and honks again. When she strains and pulls back, her hands are holding dollars. The honking grows to brazen. She folds these dollars before putting them in her coat pocket. She returns to her seat smiling, then waves as the car turns out into the street. My window is already open, and so is my heart, as I pull forward, a smile ready. I stop and reach for my wallet as she reaches for roses. From back in line, the horn is blaring, relentless. Without words, I give her a 10, and she gives me the roses, wrapping her hands around mine with a soft squeeze before letting go. She smiles and waves as I drive away. I will tell my friend about this poem, this one, about wordless roses in a raucous world. This one made a difference. Okay, and this poem does not currently have a title. I have to tell you this. I cannot turn away, even though I want to, even though it would be easier. I cannot ignore the pain and suffering of others, even when I am crushed by despair, even when I am full of fear. I will tell you that what I am most afraid of is becoming dry and indifferent, that my heart will shrivel and grow hard. So I let it break again and again and again, so that it expands instead of contracts, even when it seems there is nothing left. I know this is how it gets stronger. I can tell you that this heart also needs to be replenished, that the only remedy that renews is goodness and beauty. So I keep an eye out for it. I seek it out. I praise it wherever I find it in all its forms. And when I cannot find it, I create it. I tell you that you can do this too. You can see the goodness, feel the beauty, and be filled until saturated, drop by drop by drop. You do not want to hold it or hoard it, but rather let it brim over and spill out, washing you clean, lifting you up into its currents, where we will gather together, buoyant in the flow. Thanks.
All right, we're actually making good time. We might make it through all this. Next three readers are going to be Teresa, Aaron, and Milan. Sorry if I said that wrong.
Yes, it's no big deal, it's Teresa. No worries. Star coerced me into reading by saying she was going to read, so maybe if we go quick enough, she'll read at the end, because she bowed out. All right, I just have 2 poems. Slumber Party Invitation. No boys allowed. Check your internalized male gaze at the door. This space safe at last for ladies to cut loose. Comfortable attire only. Fish out the sweatpants with the age-worn elastic and bleach stains. Wrap up burrito-like in softest blankets. Bras strongly discouraged. Let those tatas swing merrily where they may. We dine on corn dogs, bananas, breadsticks, all the phallic foods tainted by the attention of men in public. No one here to cock a brow when we close our eyes with mouths open wide to gobble sausages with relish. Suck unabashed on popsicles, slurp the cream from eclairs. Discussion topics are a short list of what we most hate to have mansplained to us, including, but never limited to, our own bodies, sex, the aching work of womanhood, gender politics, and the politics of gender. Away from toxic fandoms, we talk of favorite sci-fi films. We will belch and slouch and sprawl along the arms of couches, hold hands in homosocial harmony. We will be unapologetic, sharp-tongued, and ambitious without letting shameful labels claim us. Don't bother with an RSVP. Pick up a bottle of wine and join me. The breadsticks are in the oven, and I just unhooked my bra. Go, you're not supposed to clap till I'm done. You're gonna break the rules. Okay, this one's called Sweat. Grandma always swore by sweat. Flushes pores, clears complexion, proof positive of proper hydration. Grandpa believed at the signpost of hard work. If his ball players weren't drenched by practice end, he sent them to run laps till he smelled them from the chalked line he towed neat while he waited in the shade. They ought to be proud of me. I live sweaty. Seek out sweat-making activities. Softball, Pilates, hiking, tennis, sex. I rigged up a treadmill under my desk. All day I walk while I run reports, sort spreadsheets. Summer brings its signature line of sweaty looks. The great lower back patch, joined in time by north creeping swass. Classic pit rings, wet neck, soggy brows. Also the sweat mustache, and its counterpart, the sweat beard. Can science explain why, once wet with sweat, a bra band never dries? Uniquely mine seem to be earlobe droplets, forearm rivulets, mortifying back-to-back sweat parentheses left behind on every outdoor seat, May through September. I'm hot and bothered to find few folks share my grandparents' sweaty perspectives. Often the wettest member of a team, I learned to keep a towel on hand, pack a spare shirt, tease myself loud before anyone else does, so I'm not stung by barbed remarks or whispered giggles. Only by the sweat dripping into my eyes. Over time, I have evolved beyond self-consciousness about my sweat, embraced the slick efficiency of my body keeping cool. Now I wear a sheen of pride my grandparents would eye with envy.
Hello. I'll just read 2
hags and drag lines fester in yesterday's smile lines, kidnapped and killed, sautéed and grilled, skinned to chairs, ribs show bare. Foodless and wordless wares, hop 2, 1, 2, that bag is far too light. Hop 2, 1, 2, dangling fruit in the night. Hop 2, 1, 2, how many in that tree? 1, 2, 3, 4, those branches are getting too heavy. 5, 6, 7, 8, but I guess we have nothing to say. And this second poem is entitled, This Poem is Not About Charlie Kirk. There's not enough love to give to you, my dear, even if you were alive to receive it. There's not enough tears to cry on your corpse, even if it were intact from the blow. There's not enough fury for me to stand, so I cry over another child dead. But to you, my love, I'm so sorry. I must simply watch from cameras far away as you die, and die, Tampa, September 11th, and die, San Francisco, September 9th, and die, Santa Ana, September 8th, and die, Cleveland, September 7th, and die, Memphis, September 7th, and die, Portsmouth, September 6th, and die, Kansas City, September 3rd, and die, Bronx, September 1st, and die, Chicago, September 1st. I don't care what bad guy held a gun to your head, or what good guy held a gun to his. There's not enough love given to you, my dear, the child that never saw tomorrow, and whose name was never seen, over a man who cheered for your death and received what he preached.
I just have one poem, and I titled it Fine Print. Before you love me, you'll be drawn to the joy I wear like second skin. You'll think it's effortless, that I was born this way, but joy was not my inheritance. It was something I had to carve out myself when bitterness threatened to take me whole. You will fall for the way I speak with conviction, how I notice the small things and make them matter. You'll mistake my passion for ease, not realizing I had to find meaning in everything, because without it, I would have collapsed under all that was taken from me. You will love the loyalty in me, the way I speak of people with reverence, the way I carry others high. You will think it's softness. You will not see the way it was born from absence, from knowing what it feels like to have no one at all. But beneath all that, there are things you cannot see until they show themselves. The triggers that don't ask permission, the ache that rises on days meant for family, on nights when silence presses too close. I can explain, but I cannot prevent. Connection has a way of shaking loose the parts of me I thought I had already healed. At first you will call it strength, how I bend without breaking, how I remain calm when chaos comes, but when it lingers, when the cost of my past seeps into the present, you will hesitate. You will start to see my loyalty as liability, my grief as misery, my resilience as unrest. And the turn is always sudden. One moment I'm admired for surviving, the next I'm accused of being defined by it. The same traits you praise become the very reasons you leave. I will try to tell you I don't need to be saved, that fixing me would undo everything I fought for. I will tell you I only need a shoulder, just a steady place to rest for a breath, and I will do the rest myself. But by then, your gaze will have changed. What you once saw as power will look to you like burden. And I will feel the ending before you speak it. I always do. There's a way people pull back when they decide that a bad week outweighs 100 good ones. There's a way they rewrite the story to make leaving easy, and it hurts to be built into someone's future and erased from it without a second thought. Before you love me, know this. I will love hard. I will offer you a kind of joy that was made, not given, a kind of devotion that came from having no one to lean on but myself. I will give you all of it freely, but when grief shows up at my door, when the life I was born into claws back in, what you once called beautiful, you may call unbearable. And I will not beg you to stay. I will only ask you remember this. The light you fell for was never effortless. It was survival turned into something you could hold. And if that is not enough, then at least let leaving be gentle, for all I have ever wanted was to be loved in my entirety, even in the moments I am hardest to hold.
Oh,
We actually have exactly 3 more, including Star.
Yay.
So our next 3 readers are going to be Shannon, Katie, and then Star.
Okay. So, my husband and I are going to be moving to Maine in October, and I've lived here my entire life. So, this is a poem about that. It's called Leaving Utah. I will miss steers' heads, their shy, shimmering pink faces and tender horns, and gold glacier lilies dangling bronze stamen, and dainty yellow bells bowing their heavy heads. I will miss magpies' raucous chatter and their black and white tuxedo feathers. I will miss their ebony beaks. But most of all, I'll miss sandhill cranes, their winter gray feathers and the crimson spot below their eyes. In summer, they are phenomenal bronze and so tall, they move like dinosaurs, deliberate, slow, stalking, gurgling and purring as they lift in pairs from green reeds. But in Maine, we can search for flowers I've never seen. Pink lady slippers, magenta bulbous pouch with a slit in the middle that attracts bees, and the trailing arbutus with fragrant white trumpet-shaped flowers and leathery oval leaves, and the painted trillium with 3 white wavy-edged petals, its center a splotch of red. And we get to see bright red crested black masked cardinals and white ibis with black wingtips and downward curving beaks, red-orange, and loons, broad black heads, necks a bluish sheen. They swim half submerged, and when they call, it's an almost human laugh. I will search for them in the waters of slender Malsum Lake. And this one's called Window. Window. Only I have this view of pale peach clouds cradled between ash branches and the far willow. There is a little white nub on a dissipating gray cloud. In the center of the tall willow, the close one, an exposed branch is bathed in gold light. The dark purple chokecherry leaves obscure it, so I need to adjust my head to see it. There is a brief window where I must bend my head just low enough, but not too low. It is still shining. It shines still. And so this is my last poem. It's called Now. Now, there is a long patch of sunlight on the lawn. Simple it shines, pale gold, ignites the grasses at the base of the spruce. The shadows waver and slink. Now the patch is shortened. Now it pools under the spruce, shrinking. The sun shines the trunk silver. Slippery light on graceful branches. I am the only one to see, but I am sharing it with you now. It is just a sliver, almost gone.
Hello, I'm Katie. I'm gonna do the one on the phone first because I think it's about to die. This one is called It Gets Better. It's dedicated to the nation of Scotland and to anyone who is named James or is a fan of a James. So it doesn't take long for a spider to spin a web. Not every tick is identical in a pocket watch. Deceptively bright and overpowering, life is finite. Hope is a hard thing to regain. Sometimes it just feels like I am being stabbed through. Death takes many adjustments. Some snow is light enough to be blown away. You can't control when repressed fears fall. Sleep improves concentration and quality of life. Work comes slow, thinking takes focus. The whooshing sounds I used to hear. When winter hits, it's all at once, light and powdery. Sometimes blue skies and the sun sneak through heavy cloud cover. Not all black inks are created equally. Deliberate steps, slow motion, forward spinning. Two birds overlapped each other. Their songs are the same year after year. Hope is the air that fills our sails, gives us a future. It didn't die. Okay. And then I just got my car fixed. So this one's called Collision. I know I'm not great at many or most or everything, but I am remarkable at impact. The two sides, many layers of slow and fast motions, crushing into one, reverberating through all of our senses for years forward and possibly back in one instant. I wish I were better at inner recovery and outer restoration, especially for others. We are here besides a wreck of what could have been, still sinking in. I do and I don't believe in collision. Is there anything miraculous, certain, or even good? And I'm gonna clip through these other ones. Okay, this one's called Snowflakes. This one is about stars in the style you'd like. I felt a ghost and remembered it. Them, a memory, rather than seeing it. Second to life in different skies, out of order blues, black and white and gray, dark hues repeating, myself rises. How she finally makes her claim, what happens at the end. Snow is like memories, each is different. And then this one is dedicated to the fact that I probably will never read Hamlet in my life, but I want to. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyways, Ghost. Ghosting is a lesser form of bleed through. A mental scan into the future. They will never be fixed. Their touch torch fire. Choices strangle me. Multifaceted layers of memory, crossed paths, and wind recalls. What was lost in translation organizes me here. Everything is coming true. Everything is real to me. Then this last one is titled Orion. And I'm going to be fast for you, Star. All right. They forged Orion. They forged constellations. One prominent to be a man traveling the earth, a lonely hunter, associated with a belt, his club, and a pup, his hound. To the moon Diana, the goddess of the hunt, I will sing of your strength and your impressed defenses. Man and goddess, solid mythology, a mirrored pair, wandering alone with their packs, somehow cataclysmically and perhaps cathartically, aligned like the three fates, and met in meeting still alive moment. Even surrounded by others, women, men, and the wild, somehow they were a pair. How could the maid of heaven be tempted because he was him and didn't press? She never had to harness possibilities like the others before her. Never wanted to before. Who would she be if? Perhaps phases of transformation, and for him a hypothetical exaltation, would her beloved father and ever watchful brother approve. Grasshoppers at dawn. The process indecision, forked and fraught, hot like a steel-heavy summer, no sweet words or consummation. Why are they still here? Together with their groups, they chased for the fairest white stag, the prince of a man, God too good a word for him, made the fatal blow, good and clean, like the rain or snow. Then proceeded to take off her skin. Let me just see. Did I skip? Yes, okay, it's all good. Then proceeded to take off her skin and sacrifice the deer to all of nature and the gods. She watched him and knew her answer to the unworded mutual quest. He caught her eyes, gaze, and knew. Orion proceeded forward to hand the hide to Diana. What to say now to this consequence? She smiled and took his offering, silence, but not empty. On their love, the sun set. A bright glint on the sparkling, overcoming darkness, a punishing scorpion, like a deadly unseen archer, shoots and stings, straight into his Achilles' heel, the fatal poison. His death as certain as the sun. He stumbled into her bare arms, shared confusion bubbled as he gasped for failing breath. Falling down as he could do, was to, okay. I kind of misspelled some things, but as he would, now I'll just skip to, was look into her eyes he had loved so much, and all she could do is see his life evaporate from his body. No shakes, no words of love, no loving kiss could rouse his shade from the underworld. She buried him, wrapped him in the ashen pelt of the great white stag of heaven. How do you move on from something you never had? Summer fell away, winter proceeded by fall, the spring failed to dawn. An unfailing tide, she watched over his failing dog, never far from his grave, like an orbit. Zeus and her regretful twin overlooked her and decided the best they could do for her, they should. Go and take his silvery gray bones and his light golden daylight shade and put him out into the little stars, crowned like a king in the sky, but still himself with his club and belt, forever clasped, distinctive, so prominent, and most importantly, never near her the moon. Apart but together for eternity, like a falling twin, rising but never quite, getting over for whole immortal life. Maybe it's not something to understand or solve, but something to ever evolve, for it could never be allowed to evolve for reasons unknown to us and them. All right, sorry, I thought that was long. That was longer than I thought. Have a good one.
Thank you, Charles. That was a wonderful, fascinating, and amazing presentation. Thank you, Woody, for making me come up here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks to the readers. What some fine pieces tonight. Horse. My friend Karen lived across the tracks on the west side of Preston, Idaho, where an occasional horse might wander the narrow city streets. Karen's family owned a horse, a tall brown horse. Karen talked me into riding bareback with her. We got on by leading the horse to a stump, Karen hoisting herself up and then holding her hand out for me to climb on behind her. The horse, who didn't have a name other than Horse, wandered down the street with us on his back. I was afraid of horses. I held my arms tight around Karen, who was a big girl and soft, hard to get a grip on. Karen was a good girl, according to my mother, not like the other girls on that side of town. Karen and I were 15. Karen went to church and didn't have any boyfriends. I'd had too many boyfriends, but I was trying to be good, like Karen, so my 35-year-old sister Manon wouldn't kidnap me again and take me away to Montpelier, where I spent 2 years of my life from 12 to 14 in the jail of her house. My fear came true when the horse got spooked and reared up. Karen and I slid off the horse's back and landed in a gravel strip at the edge of the street. I landed on my knees. Karen landed on top of me. Karen was fine when we got untangled and stood up, but I wasn't fine. My knees were pulverized. We called my mother, who had to leave work and take me to the doctor. The doctor wrapped my knees in 20 layers of gauze and the blood oozed out anyway. I had to wait in town for my mother to get off work. I hobbled around Preston until 6 o'clock, showing off my injury. It made me think of Freckles and my little sister Leanne. Freckles came to us when I was 8 and Leanne was 6. We had Clarabelle the donkey on the farm, and though Leanne loved Clarabelle, that donkey was Dad's. Leanne wanted a pony she could ride without having her teeth rattle from Clarabelle's jouncy trot. So we got Freckles. I refused to ride Freckles, who always hugged the dangerous edge of any road, but Dad made me walk that devious little horse around the farm by the reins with Leanne on his back. Then Freckles jerked me under the old apple tree and scraped Leanne off his back under low-hanging branches, with me holding the reins. I was still holding the reins when Dad gave me a good cussing out. Mother made me cut a lilac switch for her to whip my bare legs for injuring my little sister. Then Dad died, and I grew up to be a rebellious teenager, maybe a little devious like Freckles, hugging the dangerous edge of the road. My sister Manon got cancer, and my sister Marlene decided to take me under her wing before the threat of reform school came true as a last resort. Marlene lived in Salt Lake City. Her son Ron and I became great friends. He was 16 to my 15. He had a steady girlfriend, worked nights at a Dairy Queen, drank and partied after work. We hung out at the coffee shop before school every morning. We looked out for each other, covered up for each other, that is. Ron talked me into my final horse adventure. We took 2 cars of friends to a horse riding outfit on the edge of town. My car with 2 of Ron's friends got there first, rented our horses, and started up the hill. My horse was a stubborn old nag who knew that I was scared. She stood still and would not move. Ron and his girlfriend and the other 2 guys in their car never showed up. The horse ride ended. The couple I was with dropped me off at my sister's place. Ron came home an hour later and asked where I'd been. I asked where he'd been. My sister asked both of us where we'd been. Turns out there were 2 horse riding outfits on the outskirts of town, and we'd missed each other, but I don't think my sister believed us. Back in Preston, my older sister's done with being responsible for me. I stopped in at the local coffee shop where my brother Kel had asked to meet me. Kel was on leave from the Air Force during the Vietnam War. He joined up after Dad died. Kel handed me a little jewel box. He apologized for being an absent brother when I was having so much trouble in my life. In the box was a silver filigree heart necklace with an amethyst at the center, my birthstone. It was a gift for my 16th birthday. I keep that heart necklace in my old 1970s jewelry box to remember the gift of Kel's words that came from his heart. It was a gift that surprised me as much as being on horseback one moment and on my knees the next. It was a gift that changed my mind about siblings, changed my mind about love and guilt and injury and punishment. But it didn't change my mind about horses.
Thank you all for coming so much. That is the end of the program. If you wouldn't mind taking at least the chair you're sitting on and putting that away, that would be great. But please come in 2 weeks for our next event. We'll have Sunny Wilkinson and Darren Edwards reading. It's going to be great.
And buy books.
And buy books. Buy all of Charles's books. Every one of them.